Hello, friendly neighborhood nerds. If you want to hear interviews from industry pros, get first looks, and have access to endless comic content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell!
What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? It's your girl, Respawn, joined with Robo Strange and a very, very special guest. Juan Doe is a professional illustrator with over 10 years' experience in the comic book industry. He has produced over 100 covers, and his sequential highlights include the Fantastic Four and Puerto Rico trilogy, the Legion of Monsters miniseries for Marvel, and Joker's Asylum Scarecrow for DC. He has illustrated American Monster, World Reader, Animosity the Rise, Dark Arc, and last year his first solo work, which we'll go into in just a moment. Juan, thanks for being on the show with us today. How are you?
Thank you guys for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Before we get into the questions, I got a quick question. So typically, what we do is we try to go into do our homework, like who are we interviewing, so we don't look like idiots on the show. So one thing that I couldn't find was your face. So you go by Juan Doe, which I'm gonna assume I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that's not your legal name. And your face is the white mask. What's going on there?
Yeah. I guess when you look at it, it's basically just a symbol, I guess. In terms of this becoming a thing where I was a professional artist or something like that, it kind of started by accident. Juan Doe was basically like my tag. When I was into graffiti, and it was just sort of like every one of us had a name, and that was just like the name I went by. And then I remember just getting like an offer for a gig, and I just submitted my name as Juan Doe as a lark, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And the client thought that was funny, and I did the job. It wasn't comics; it was, I think it's like a web design thing, and that kind of just got it rolling for me. And I was like, well, you know what, it's a pretty cool artist name, and then I kind of had like this incident. I used to have a studio in New York City, like an art studio, because prior to doing comics I was a painter. So that's kind of the world I was in, I guess, the art world or whatever. That's a whole other universe that's very complicated and funny, but I was kind of in that world, and there's a lot of freedom in that world, to sort of just kind of really do what you want. You're not really working for anybody, so it was a very awesome time. And I had this open studio, and someone came along and they saw my art, and then they asked my name, and I told them my name, and they said, well, shouldn't... So right off the bat, I'm from New York City, I am Puerto Rican, Ecuadorian, and I grew up in a very diverse culture with diverse people. So for me, my identity is as a New Yorker, and that is sort of connected to a very global network of languages and cultures. So I love that, totally fed into my creativity. But this particular person said that because of my last name, that I should be making art that's, I guess, relevant to my culture. I just thought that was odd, to sort of maybe typecast me because of my name.
Sure.
Which is not something that isn't influenced in my work. Of course, I can draw upon things in my culture and represent that. But the Juan Doe sort of also became an FU to that ideology.
Amazing.
Sort of like, obviously it's a play on John Doe.
Yeah.
And Juan, obviously, you couldn't get a more Spanish name than Juan, So it was, in a way, a sort of creative response to that incident. And then it kind of flowed into actually it becoming a professional, moniker, which is not unheard of within the creative landscape. So, yeah, and then I don't even know, 2005, I think I started. So, yeah, 15 years later, and Juan Doe lives in comics.
That's awesome. That's super awesome.
Yeah.
So going into your work, I wanted to talk a little bit about bad reception. So what was really awesome about this title is that on the cover you got one name, Juan Doe, and it's like oh, and I look inside the thing and you got art, cover, letterer, like writer. So that was pretty awesome. So for people at home, go check it out. It already has how many? It's 5 issues, right?
It's 5 issues.
Okay. So the premise is, just for those watching, celebrity wedding of the century, set in an undisclosed remote location, no access to Wi-Fi, cell phone reception, or outside world. But the dream wedding becomes a nightmare when, one by one, the guests are brutally slaughtered by a mysterious killer who brands his victims with the hashtag. So, what is the inspiration here? Because this is like the third book, but still way different than anything else I've read. But there's like this warning, like kind of started a few years ago with Black Mirror, right? This whole like social media warning. What is the inspiration here besides The Office?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, that is like, I guess, my baby. It's the first book that I wrote, Andrew, soup to nuts. It was a labor of love, passion. I cannot thank Aftershock Comics enough, because it's very difficult to be able to have that kind of assignment, where I could throw myself into this, right down to the lettering, because it was such a passionate project. So I had always figured if I was going to do my own stuff, it's got to be like to the full tilt, and that's what Bad Reception was. And the idea basically came from, I think we're all very much aware of the global landscape that we live in today, in terms of communications, and specifically how that translates into social media. And, Bad Reception, it's complete now, right? Issue 5 came out, I believe, in July. But the thing is, I started the book last year. So the first issue came out last August. So I had started writing it basically 2018, 19, even though I had the idea, originally the idea was 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I had come up with the idea in 2009. And at the time, it still kind of had the basic premise, except that it really was about cell phones with bad reception, because at the time cell phone coverage wasn't as blanket as it is today.
Sure.
So that was kind of the spin there, but there wasn't really social media sort of involved, and that's sort of what made me realize that would be a really cool idea today if I kind of upgraded it. And then that's what it turned into. Well, let's take the person who's the most followed human being on social media, and that's this performer named Gaia, who's New Rican, and she is the most followed person on social media. And I thought that'd be interesting to sort of play with this idea of how far this addiction can go for a person. Because there's actually a real thing called nomophobia, which is like fear of no mobile phone. And there's all kinds of stresses that are already sort of associated with social media. And I think it's set to become the number one sort of disorder, that we'll all have to be dealing with. And I thought that was really, even for myself, for all of us, for my families, for my kids, and you kind of see it and that it's a part of how we connect, but there's something off about it.
That's right.
It just makes you wonder what's wrong with people, Like,
yeah,
why do they?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a weird bubble, because is it that people behave a certain way just because they're on social media, or does social media create that behavior? It's a very, very interesting question. And so that got me really interested in, how can I sort of tell a story, make it fun, the stuff that I like, and sort of try to, I don't want to be preachy or make some kind of social commentary. It's just more like take observations and sort of bake them into these characters and try to make it a little bit larger than life. And I thought it worked out well. I mean, I felt creatively satisfied. I hope that everyone who read it and was a part of that journey enjoyed it and just had fun, and maybe came away, a little wiser because of it.
Yeah,
it was fun, but it was also scary.
Yeah. Do you have
Yes.
any personal experience with that? Because there's one part in there that I found really interesting, and us with trying to get our YouTube channel kind of going and all that. We see it, especially in places like Comic-Con, where the amount of followers is your currency. And I saw that with when you had the actor from Law and Order, she was talking about that being your currency. Now I'm imagining an artist, and it seems like you're a pure artist. You were a painter and had a studio, and then you moved into comic books, and I'm just speculating here because I'm not an artist, but it seems like, hey, this is my art. Isn't this good? Do you want to buy it? Versus yeah, but how many followers on Instagram do you have? You know what I mean? Is that something you can relate to? Is that something that's affected your industry?
Yeah, and it's a very valid point, very good point. I think, I mean, it's without a doubt that followers and social media has created a sense of social capital and currency. So you don't necessarily have to make a lot of money, but that's why we have a whole industry of influencers, right? That's a category now. You can grow up and say, I want to be an influencer.
That's right.
It's not a ridiculous thing. It's like a real thing. And it connects to like young people, of course, because young people are insatiable and they want things, and there isn't any patience. So I can imagine that we're seeing this across the board, from every industry, to the point that I even speculated, like, you're gonna have to have some kind of Facebook account, or else you won't be a validated citizen. It's become our identifications, our markers, and yes, it is baked into what we're worth. Whether that's real or not, not really sure, but we can sort of see that that's what it is, right? The more followers you have, there's something about that. This guy's got X amount of followers. Even I've seen it. And in this tiniest, I don't have a lot of followers compared to so many other people, but I understand that if someone doesn't have a lot of followers, that may seem like a big number, and then there's the sense of like, oh, this guy's doing something. Because I've seen it myself too. Sure, if I look at someone, oh, this guy's got like 150,000 followers.
Yeah, he's got to be something.
He's doing something, or he's connected with someone. So it's a form of social capital, but I also think it's a form of social credibility if you're in a profession that needs connection with an audience. That happens anyway in any sort of business. You have sort of marketers and people that are connected to the audience. In this case, we can be the product and connect directly to the audience, and we've never had that kind of mass communication and connection ever before. So it's very interesting, that sadly in some areas you may be judged that way. So if you're a young person, that's a terrible pressure to sort of deal with. It's sort of like the whole popularity contest in school. It's becoming that.
That's right.
The whole world is becoming a popularity contest that then becomes some sort of ranking system. In whatever area you're in. So, and there's no really, I'm not saying that it's good or bad. It's just a very fascinating time to see it happening in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I say this to Robo all the time. We feel like the pioneers of the social media timeline or whatever. It's bizarre watching, especially like platforms like YouTube, how they've evolved. Look, I've got no good segue for this, but I read American Monster, written by Brian Azzarello, and holy shit, amazing. Like, so fucking, it was just filled with action scenes, and it was from the get-go just so fun to read. What was it like working on that?
Oh man, I mean, honestly, that was the book that sort of kickstarted my latest phase, I guess, as a comic book artist. Because fortunately, I started at Marvel, and then I was pretty much at Marvel and DC for a good 10 years. That was pretty much, and I wasn't always working full time because I always did other things, but I always did like covers. So I always had like covers interspersed with, the Fantastic Four trilogy and Legion of Monsters. So I would do these special projects, but 100 Bullets was the book that got me to do comics.
Nice.
So so I've had such a high regard for that book and Brian Azzarello, that I was reading that and I was Dave Johnson's covers and Eduardo Riso and his writing. I was like, oh my God, there's something going on here. Because I had been I wasn't reading comics at that time. I grew up reading comics. I loved comics. I read comics all through high school into college. And then I had a gap where, I was doing other stuff and art stuff. And so I wasn't really following comics. And then I got my hands on 100 Bullets and I just got hooked. So I followed this series. And then that sort of really inspired me. So I always kind of credit that series and Brian, for kind of kickstarting my career, basically. So when Aftershock started in 2014, maybe,
I think Sorry, on that.
Yeah, yes, I was at Marvel. And in fact, Mike Martz was my editor because he was at Marvel, and I was set to do a whole bunch of stuff, and then he left to do Aftershock, and then Marvel basically, I think a lot of projects got juggled, and the books that I was going to be on, I got cut from, so I was kind of in this limbo where for the first time I really didn't have a place to work or a book or a project. And I had been dabbling with my own stuff, so I thought, well, maybe this is like a good time to just kind of work on my stuff. So I started like developing some ideas, and I was actually going to jump on a book. I don't remember what it was, but something that I was going to do and maybe self-publish it. And then Mike sent me an email that, hey, we're starting this company, and Brian Azzarello is doing a book with us, and he wants you to do the art. I was like, what?
That would be such an amazing
That's so
message
dope.
to get.
And it was really like one sentence, like we're doing a book with Brian Azzarello Aftershock, and he wants you as the artist. I was like, I think it was like a nanosecond before, like I replied, but actually before I said yes, I remember taking like a few minutes to
chill, right?
Yeah, to kind of let that sink in, and I was like, he wants me to be the artist? Are you serious?
But when you say yes, you got to act like that's no big deal, though, right?
Oh, exactly. so instead of like replying in 10 seconds, I took 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Some class.
That's right. Yeah, I have some time. Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, and then that was just an amazing project. And then when I read what the synopsis was, I was like, oh, forget about it. This is going to be fantastic. And I got the script. And then the interesting thing was that since Aftershock had basically just started, there were still like a lot of pieces that they were filling up. So I just remember asking Mike if Mike Martz, the editor-in-chief, if they had a letterer for American Monster, and they said that they didn't. And so I kind of asked if I could try out. So the only reason I did that is because that's how sort of granular I wanted to be with Brian's script and his words.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to build it out with the characters. Like I'm not a letterer, although I messed around with it. But as a professional, it's always just been the art. I've never said, hey, let me letter the book.
Right.
That's something,
That's a good sign.
There's professionals, everyone does what they. In this particular, it was just a very unique situation where I figured, well, let me, if I can letter this and bake it into my overall schedule, I think it'd be really cool for me to learn. It was basically the way I saw it, and that's how much I wanted to sort of see the process of Brian's scripts. He's one of the best writers, period, and I'm just blown away by his economy and the way he structures stuff. So yeah, I was just very honored to be a part of that series. I believe we did 6 issues, and hopefully, who knows, maybe it'll come back to wrap up. I know Brian's extremely busy and he's got a bunch of stuff going on, but that kind of kick-started my career at Aftershock, which is now been about 6 years now.
By the way,
and then that led to all these other things. So yes,
that's so cool to hear. I was just going to say, for our audience that may or may not have read it, it's like reading Die Hard. It's just like from the very beginning, it's like action-packed, and it's so satisfying for someone that I personally love those cheesy action films where it's just like action scene, just like pounding you with entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't mean for that to sound so sexual, but you should read it. I know. Robo's got a question about Animosity, but yeah, anyone that hasn't read it, give it a go, because like Juan just said, Azzarello, powerhouse, amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So the next one is pretty much the same question, but it's just about animosity, right? So in particular, the Rise spinoff with Marguerite Bennett. Like, what was that experience like? How's that?
Again. That's and I do feel so fortunate because Marguerite's another Titan writer. She's amazing. She's one of my favorite writers. I did a project with her at Marvel, and then they asked me to do. It was like, I think it was like 1 issue of this Animosity, The Rise, and then they turned it into 3 issues. So I got to do this particular arc with her, and that's just one of the best ideas I've ever heard. About animals becoming sentient. I mean, we've seen kind of sections of that in other sort of media. That kind of example with animals.
It's fucking funny, The
But,
Rise. I laughed out loud multiple times because there are
Yes.
so many opportunities for jokes where you just like it's exactly what you'd want, not necessarily what you'd always expect. Like the dolphin stuff from the beginning just had me giggling so hard.
And I remember illustrating that whole thing, and I think I thought to myself, man, this is like so anti-Disney right here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'd describe it. Yeah.
you know, but that's why that's such a great story, because she's able to sort of take these animals and sort of imbue them with these characteristics that we can easily relate to, right? Because we understand that relationship between man and animal.
That's right.
So what a playground! Fantastic story, fantastic universe that she built out. So yeah, so that was I believe may have been the project after American Monster, or maybe that was World Reader. I'm not too sure, but yeah, that another fantastic writer, someone that I also learned a lot from. It's also one of my favorite series.
Nice.
Cool.
I want to ask you about Dark Arc. So we're sort of hip-hopping all over the Aftershock series that you've done. But that one is written by Cullen Bunn, and it has a spin-off. And I'm curious if there are other spin-offs planned, because the concept for me is really interesting. Again, anyone that hasn't picked it up already, you've got Noah's Ark, and then there's the Dark Arc, which is like all the spooky monsters and shit, which I never thought about. I was like, that's such a cool concept. But then even the way you like draw the book is really like you'll have the Noah's Ark in these nice sort of like sepia type tones, and then it switches over to this Dark Arc and it's like monsters and fucking Dracula and like all kinds of crazy shit going on. Are there any, like, can we expect any other spin-offs from that series? Do you have any other things that you'd like to do in Dark Arc?
I would always, be down for something related to Dark Arc. I'm not privy at the moment if there's other books happening, because I had done, I believe, the first 17 issues out of the first 4 volumes. And then like I just ran into like scheduling stuff, so I wasn't able to wrap that up. But I did do the first 3 volumes. Another one of the best ideas I've ever heard, and you get it right away.
Yeah.
The minute you realize what it is in comparison to Noah's Ark, it just clicks. You get it. And it's a fantastic concept, and taking sort of the classic monsters that are baked into our myths and our cultures, and put them on a ship like a prison. I mean, it's really fantastic. Another amazing story that I got to play with some of my favorite designs with monsters and creatures. And Cullen is just master of horror and diabolical ideas. So. That's one of my favorite series of all time as well.
Yeah, amazing. That's the thing. Like, I keep reading, because I've been on an Aftershock bender, because mistakenly I was like, they've only been around since 2015ish.
You can get it all.
It'll be a smaller library for me to read. But then,
right.
then I got stuck into all these series, and I was like, these are all fucking outstanding. I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I have to read them all.
That's right. So World Reader is one that really fucking blew me away. It's a series that stars Sarah. She's an astronaut. She travels from dead planet to dead planet. She talks to ghosts of the dead worlds. She's trying to figure out what's killing the universe. And it's just like, it's one of those ones where you're like, why didn't I think of this first?
Yeah.
But I'm reading it and I'm like, so someone else did the coloring on that, right? You had a bit of a more fleshed out art team. You were doing the art, someone else was coloring. But
I did everything on that as well.
Oh, you did everything? Amazing.
Yeah.
Man, the trippy cosmic art that you've got going on, like all those colors, like insane. Blew my mind away. But the bad guy, without giving too much away, he's really like he's nightmare inducing, his design. Was that a real collaboration between you and Jeff, or did Jeff kind of already have this nightmare in his head?
Yeah, I think, again, Jeff Loveness, another super awesome writer, does a lot of things really well, and he sort of put that all in the script. So it was very detailed, very clear. And I love that story too, and that's the really cool part, when you're able to sort of work with different writers, is it's all these different universes, so something like his world, I mean, I'm not sure if that was like the tone that he was expecting, but it sort of led to what I created because it felt that way for me. This sort of space opera, this exposition of the soul and sort of spirits, again, without giving away kind of what it's about, and to follow this astronaut's journey, in the universe, really allowed to create this sort of really cool imagery, and his stuff is tight to his scripts. Absolutely, a lot of that was built out of his amazing ideas.
Sweet. I went ahead and read the 2011 Deadpool annual that you worked on with John Layman, and it felt like you were having so much fun drawing it. Like, it really came through in the art. You had these kind of like besties hanging out.
That was an art team too. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Cool.
That was an awesome collaboration. Yes, amazing. I remember that.
It made me wonder, when you're drawing these scenes out of like best friends frolicking through the field. Are you in an office? Do you have like a soundtrack going? Do you change your music up depending on what title you're working on? Like, what does that look like?
That's a good question. I think at that time I was in New York City, and I'll never forget that one because I was laughing at like every scene and every page, and it was like a crazy. There was like a Dr. Doom Deadpool in it. There was Deadpool in some kind of S&M gear.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of really off the walls. And at that particular point, I think I was just doing black and white art, and we had an awesome coloring team. But I think I may have been playing music, definitely, because I kind of like to have music in the background. I was probably just cackling every day that I was doing that particular book.
Amazing.
Do they tell you what to write, or do they just say, "I'm sorry, draw"? Like when you're doing the arts on the pencils and stuff, like when they say, "I want this kind of Deadpool here," or did you make up any of those yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely written in the script, and they didn't ask for any kind of specific way to draw it, so I was able to sort of interpret that the way I was creating it at the time. Because that was like 2011, so that was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
By the way, Spidey's costume in that is like, I think, my favorite Spidey costume because the cape, it's fucking sick.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was fun. That's right. I absolutely remember that.
So cool.
Yeah.
You also did a lot of X-Men, right? So kind of like the theme here is not only your incredible art, but also the career you've had kind of just like teaming up with these incredible names, right? So making this like powerhouse team, of books.
Yeah.
So with like Marvel and X-Men and really, I guess anywhere, is there a writer or other creator, or if not, maybe a title that you can't wait to work on or hope that you get to work on?
For me, it'll probably always be Hulk.
Yes.
That's if we're gonna just get to fanboy basics and Marvel, for me it's like Hulk. The stuff I did in Marvel was always the work that I just cherish, because it's obviously Marvel. We know how much of a history they have, and my first project with them was Fantastic Four in Puerto Rico. With the writer was Tom Beeland, who was living in Puerto Rico at the time.
Yeah.
He had been living there for 20 years, and then the editor of the book was Puerto Rican. So that was like my first project with Marvel, and it was really sort of special because I kind of kicked off, kind of doing these kind of project based, because my next book was with Dennis Hopeless, Legion of Monsters, and then I did a slew of X-Men covers. So that David Hine wrote for X-Men 198. I've been very, very fortunate to have been paired up with really fantastic writers and collaborators, which obviously, if I hadn't had that experience, I really doubt I would have been able to effectively write my own book and story and feel that I would, be able to hold my own.
Right.
So I feel a lot of that was training and experience and really sort of learning the craft of storytelling with these fantastic writers. Absolutely.
Yeah. Dope. Speaking of Fantastic Four,
yes.
Segue. so you did the art on a book set in La Isla de Encanta, but it's called Isla de la Muerte. And
Yes.
I'm going to be that person. Sorry. I'm going to be that person you spoke about at the very start of this entire show, where it was like, oh, well, shouldn't you be doing more art like this? But I'm not going to be like them. But what I am going to say, though, is do you have any plans to do more stuff that brings representation out like that? Because I thought that was super awesome to see the big flag in the back, and it's set in a place that it's not New York, Chicago, or LA. Like, those are the only three cities that exist, apparently.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In hindsight, that was 2007.
Mm-hmm.
That's a book that if that had come out today, it'd probably get a lot of, attention.
That's right.
A lot of adulation for its diversity. And so I think at that time, I remember it really sort of setting itself up as a very special project because of everything you just said, of its location, of sort of really allowing Puerto Rico to shine as a backdrop and within the settings and the way that the team was composed. And also that book at the time, from what I remember, was the first North American comic book that was ever published in English and in Spanish, because we did a Spanish edition of that.
That's dope.
And it was really like fantastic project. It wasn't like a monthly thing. It was a special book. It was a one shot. It was like a double-sized issue. But I remember getting a lot of press at the time. I was also invited to Puerto Rico to do a signing, and it was like the craziest line I've ever seen, and
how awesome is that?
Apparently that book was, I guess, we sold the most amount of books in that store's history in Puerto Rico. So that was a very special project.
Cool.
It allowed me to represent, part of my culture in a very big way with these, the Fantastic Four, some of my favorite, characters, the first superhero team, Jack Kirby. And it was so successful that it turned into a trilogy, and every one of those books is based in a different location in Puerto Rico, created by the same team.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very proud of that, and I wish we would see maybe more of that, where we can represent different locations and with these mainstream characters, and have it be normalized. Because at the end of the day, it was still a great Fantastic Four, story. Each one of them were really awesome adventure with classic villains, So we definitely would like to see more of that, and I hope. I mean, for me personally, I think a lot of the characters that I naturally create, I want them to be diverse and to be from different backgrounds, because that's the New Yorker in me.
That's
right. Sort of what I know. It's what my worldview sort of is, and that's just cool to represent something that may be underrepresented in the mainstream. So I'm always going to sort of champion that, and as long as we have good stories and great characters, all of that can work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
That's dope.
Hey, speaking of what we can see more of, what have you got upcoming that we should know about?
Yes, I am in. I can't sort of say what I'm doing, but I am developing. Right now, we're looking at 2021.
Nice.
Obviously, with what happened, it's been really crazy. I had a lot of things scheduled and everything got bumped. But I am absolutely developing new stories, and that's sort of my path now. I don't have anything where I'm working with other writers at the moment. It's basically just developing my own stories, and I'm really excited about that, because I think this is sort of this new chapter that I really want to explore as a writer and an artist.
That's awesome.
And it's different, because it's like if you get a book and a project and you get a schedule, and you're on that schedule and you're grinding and you're sort of working. But in this case, it's about development and really wanting to tell the story that I want to tell. Bad Reception was an incredible experience. I can't believe it happened, but once it did, and once I sort of got a taste of creating stories from the ground up, developing my own characters and trying to have fun with the craft that I love, I don't really see me sort of going back. Like I think I can only sort of write and draw.
That's awesome.
So I do have one book that I'm negotiating. Hopefully we can make an announcement soon. And then I have my.
Are you allowed
other
to say
book
the publisher?
That's
Is this going to be more Aftershock stuff, or is that also kind of?
Well, yeah, they're absolutely involved.
Okay, got it.
It's just a matter of sort of locking down some of the ideas, but I'm developing sort of a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah,
Nice.
I'd like to sort of I have like a 5-year plan. Like I can pump out stories for the next 5 years.
That's
It's just
awesome.
a matter of getting the logistics in place and being able to transition into, well, okay, and now I'm gonna write and draw. So like, how do you do this? Like continuously. But it's super, super, super awesome and fantastic. And I'm just kind of throwing myself into my work right now.
That's awesome.
And trying to tell good stories and do what I do best.
Yeah.
It's
I can't
the
wait.
best that we can do.
That's
Totally.
that's
so
impressive.
excited.
I don't even know what the hell I'm going to do next week.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's pretty dope.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting situation. The whole world is in a topsy-turvy change. So there's a lot of uncertainty, so it's hard to plan things. But I think regardless, you have to have some kind of anchor to give yourself, because if you get lost in like the day-to-day of it, you can kind of just go crazy. That's social media, right?
Yeah.
You could spend a couple hours on social media and you just come out of there like, Jesus Christ, the whole world is like
100%.
falling apart.
100%. But somehow
and-
you kind of
and,
still get addicted to it. It's weird.
Yeah. And maybe the larger truth is that it really isn't that crazy in as extreme, but of course there's obviously a lot of global situations that are colliding, all at once, and we're all a part of it. We got to do our best to stay focused on what we can do best. In this particular case, all I can do is tell stories. So that's sort of what my focus on. Try to be as positive as I can with that.
That's awesome.
yeah.
And
then-
having you guys, just even talking about this, is fantastic. It means that we can at least connect and share this love of this craft and read and enjoy these stories and give something good out there. So
Nicely
there's
said.
enough crazy stuff. So
100%.
absolutely. Thank you guys again.
100%.
Freaking love comics.
Yes,
Love
love
comics.
comics.
Ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, that is Juan Doe. Juan, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some of your time and talking about your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Guys, don't forget to wear your mask, wash your hands, stay socially distanced. We out.
Subscribe, ring the bell, and
Take care.
be free. Follow our links and watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool